from Mercia, and scarcely a day passes but fresh bands arrive at Thetford, and I fear that ere long East Anglia, like Northumbria, will fall into their clutches. Nay, unless we soon make head against them, they will come to occupy all the island, just as did our forefathers." "That were a shame indeed!" Edmund exclaimed. "You know that the people conquered by our ancestors were unwarlike and cowardly, but it would be shame indeed were we Saxons so to be overcome by the Danes, seeing moreover that we have the help of God, being Christians, while the Danes are pagans and idolaters." "Nevertheless, my son, for the last 5 years these heathen have been masters of Northumbria, have wasted the whole country, and have plundered and destroyed the churches and monasteries. At present they have but made a beginning here in East Anglia, but if they continue to flock in they will soon overrun the whole country, instead, of course, of having as at present a mere foothold near the rivers, except for those who have come down to Thetford. We have been among the first sufferers, seeing that our lands lie round Thetford, and hitherto I had hoped that there would be a general rising against these invaders, but the king is indolent and unwarlike, and I see that he will not arouse himself and call his ealdormen and thanes together for a united effort until it is too late. Already from the north the Danes are flocking down into Mercia, and although the advent of the West Saxons to the aid of the King of Mercia forced them to retreat for a while, I doubt not that they will soon pour down again." "'Tis a pity, father, that the Saxons are not all under one leading, then we might surely defend England against the Danes. If the people did but rise and fall upon each band of Northmen as they arrived, they would get no footing among us." "Yes," the father replied, "it is the unhappy divisions between the Saxon kingdoms which have enabled the Danes to get so firm a footing in the land. Our only hope now lies in the West Saxons. Until lately they were at feud with Mercia, but the royal families are now related by marriage, seeing that the King of Mercia is wedded to a West Saxon princess, and that Alfred, the West Saxon king's brother and heir to the throne, has lately espoused one of the royal blood of Mercia. The fact that they marched at the call of the King of Mercia and drove the Danes from Nottingham shows that the West Saxon princes are alive to the common danger of the country, and if they are but joined heartily by our people of East Anglia and the Mercians, they may yet succeed in checking the progress of these heathen. And now, Edmund, as we see no hope of any general effort to drive the Danes off our coast, 'tis useless for us to lurk here longer. I propose tomorrow then to journey north into Lincolnshire to the Abbey of Croyland, where, as you know, my brother Theodore is the abbot. There we can rest in peace for a time and watch the progress of events. If we hear that the people of these parts are aroused from their lethargy, we will come back and fight for our homes and lands. If not, I will no longer stay in East Anglia, which I see is destined to fall piecemeal into the hands of the Danes, but we will journey down to Somerset, and I will pray that King Ethelred to assign me lands there, and to take me as his thane." While they had thus been talking, Egbert had been broiling the eels and wild ducks over the fire. He was a freeman and a distant relation of Edmund's father, Eldred, who was an ealdorman in West Norfolk, his lands lying beyond Thetford, and upon whom, therefore, the first brunt of the Danish invasion from Mercia had fallen. He had made a stout resistance, and assembling his people had given battle to the invaders. These, however, were too strong and numerous, and his force having been scattered and dispersed, he sought refuge with Egbert and his son in the Fen country. Here he had remained for 2 months in hopes that some general effort would be made to drive back the Danes, but being now convinced that at present the Angles were too disunited to join in a common effort, he determined to retire for a while from the scene. "I suppose, father," Edmund said, "you will leave your treasures buried here?" "Yes," his father replied. "We have no means of transporting them, and we can at all times return and fetch them. We must dig up the big chest and take such garments as we may need, and the personal ornaments of our rank, but the rest, with the gold and silver vessels, can remain here till we need them." Gold and silver vessels seem little in accordance with the primitive mode of life prevailing in the 9th century. The Saxon civilization was indeed a mixed one. Their mode of life was primitive, their dwellings, with the exception of the religious houses and the abodes of a few of the great nobles, simple in the extreme, but they possessed vessels of gold and silver, armlets, necklaces, and ornaments of the same metals, rich and brightly coloured dresses, and elaborate bed furniture, while their tables and household utensils were of the roughest kind, and their floors strewn with rushes. When they invaded and conquered England, they found existing the civilization introduced by the Romans, which was far in advance of their own. Much of this they adopted. The introduction of Christianity further advanced them in the scale. The prelates and monks from Rome brought with them a high degree of civilization, and this to no small extent the Saxons imitated and borrowed. The church was held in much honour, great wealth and possessions were bestowed upon it, and the bishops and abbots possessed large temporal as well as spiritual power, and bore a prominent part in the councils of the kingdoms. But even in the handsome and well built monasteries, with their stately services and handsome vestments, learning was at the lowest ebb, so low indeed that when Prince Alfred desired to learn Latin he could find no one in his father's dominions capable of teaching him, and his studies were for a long time hindered for want of an instructor, and at the time he ascended the throne he was probably the only Englishman outside a monastery who was able to read and write fluently. "Tell me, father," Edmund said after the meal was concluded, "about the West Saxons, since it is to them, as it seems, that we must now look for protection of England against the Danes. This Prince Alfred, of whom I before heard you speak in terms of high praise, is the brother, is he not, of the king? In that case, how is it that he does not reign in Kent, which I thought, though joined to the West Saxon kingdom, was always ruled over by the eldest son of the king?" "Yes, such has been the rule, Edmund, but seeing the troubled times when Ethelbert came to the throne, it was thought better to unite the two kingdoms under one crown, with the understanding that at Ethelbert's death Alfred would succeed him. Their father, Ethelwulf, was a weak king, and should have been born a churchman rather than a prince. He nominally reigned over Wessex, Kent, and Mercia, but the last paid him but a slight allegiance. Alfred was his favourite son, and he sent him, when quite a child, to Rome for a visit. In 855 he himself, with a magnificent retinue, and accompanied by Alfred, visited Rome, travelling through the land of the Franks, and it was there, doubtless, that Alfred acquired that love of learning, and many of those ideas, far in advance of his people, which distinguish him. His mother, Osburga, died before he and his father started on the pilgrimage. The king was received with much honour by the Pope, to whom he presented a gold crown of 4 pounds weight, 10 dishes of the purest gold, a sword richly set in gold, 2 gold images, some silver gilt urns, stoles bordered with gold and purple, white silken robes embroidered with figures, and other costly articles of clothing for the celebration of the service of the church, together with rich presents in gold and silver to the churches, bishops, clergy, and other dwellers in Rome. They say that the people of Rome marvelled much at these magnificent gifts from a king of a country which they had considered as barbarous. On his way back he married Judith, daughter of the king of the Franks, a foolish marriage, for the king was far advanced in years, and Judith was but a girl. Ethelbald, Ethelwulf's eldest son, had acted as regent in his father's absence, and so angered was he at this marriage that he raised his standard of revolt against his father. At her marriage Judith had been crowned queen, and this was contrary to the customs of the West Saxons. Therefore Ethelbald was supported by the people of that country. On his father's return to England, however, father and son met, and a division of the kingdom was agreed upon. Ethelbald received Wessex, the principal part of the kingdom, and Ethelwulf took Kent, which he had already ruled over in the time of his father Egbert. Ethelwulf died a few months afterwards, leaving Kent to Ethelbert, his second surviving son. The following year, to the horror and indignation of the people of the country, Ethelbald married his stepmother Judith, but 2 years afterwards died, and Ethelbert, king of Kent, again united Wessex to his own dominions, which consisted of Kent, Surrey, and Sussex. Ethelbert reigned for but a short time, and at his death Ethelred, his next brother, ascended the throne. Last year Alfred, the youngest brother, married Eswitha, the daughter of Ethelred Mucil, Earl of Gainey, in Lincolnshire, whose mother was one of the royal family of Mercia. It was but a short time after the marriage that the Danes poured into Mercia from the north. Messengers were sent to ask the assistance of the West Saxons. These at once obeyed the summons, and, joining the Mercians, marched against the Danes, who shut themselves up in the strong city of Nottingham, and were there for some time besieged. The place was strong, the winter at hand, and the time of the soldier's service near.